Good morning. My attempt to take at least a few days off failed because Vladimir Putin gave his speech that requires a commentary. Generally, for the last few days, we have witnessed a number of events, actually very interesting ones, but primarily from a political standpoint. I would like to point out that politics is not my favorite topic. There are people that can handle this topic better, whose knowledge of politics is deeper and of higher quality than mine. Still, today I'm going to share my opinion. So let's talk about the first thing. The people in power that stand behind Donald Trump, or as we call them, the conservative demiurges of the United States, have already understood that between now and the beginning of this fall, there is a probability, actually a very high probability, of a grandiose financial collapse. This raises two principal questions. The first one is whether they realize that the upcoming crisis will be more severe than the crisis of the early 1930s, meaning the one that resulted in the Great Depression. The second one is whether or not they realize that the sooner the crisis happens, the easier it will be for the United States to manage its consequences. This is also because time does not play in Trump's favor. It is quite opposite. As we observed over the last days, the Trump administration has been losing the political games to the Euro-Atlantic elites. For example, we see an ultimatum to Russia put together by the Group of Four. I doubt this was done according to Trump's wishes, yet his name was attached. More precisely, Trump was forcefully pulled into this ultimatum. Why are we seeing this ultimatum? Why is there so much hysteria around it? The matter is that once again the demiurges, but in this case not the conservative, but the liberal ones, those that stand behind the political actors of the Euro-Atlantic zone, also became aware of the imminent economic crisis. But in terms of severity, they believe it is going to be about the same as the downfall in 1930s. So they think they will survive it. Therefore, the liberal elites set two goals for themselves. First is to defeat Trump. The second one is to defeat Putin, or broadly Russia. Ideally, both of them need to be defeated before the crisis strikes. Why do they need to defeat Trump? This is because money creation by the Federal Reserve is the main leverage left. So as soon as the crisis erupts, Trump, or generally US President, if not Trump, then someone else, will easily establish direct control over the Federal Reserve System. Because in the event of a severe crisis, the administration will ignore various rules, regulations, and other stupid formalities. That is what Roosevelt did in 33. I mean President Franklin Roosevelt in 1933. And Putin needs to be defeated for a different reason, because Russia is another country that will not need additional resources to overcome this crisis. Moreover, once the global logistical chains break down, Russia might actually come out of this crisis easier than the rest. This will hold true, even if we assume that Russia is hit by the crisis just as hard as the West. The latter is not going to be the case. Russia will be hit less hard than most countries. But I'm not going to argue this point with Western experts. They believe Russia will go downhill just as much as the West, because this is what their mainstream beliefs suggest. Remember the saying, I believe because it is absurd. Generally speaking, it is impossible to argue with one's beliefs. So these are the two goals. the liberal elites are trying to reach. They succeeded in attaching Trump's name to the ultimatum and then decided to wait. There is a hypothesis that it was supposed to be Modi, the Prime Minister of India, who would deliver this ultimatum to Russia, so the document would not be presented by the guys that wrote it. Why? Well, you need to understand that when any one of the three, Starmer, Macron, with Zelensky, or Merz, begin to declare their ultimatum to Russia, this is certainly something amusing about it, something operetta-like. This makes me want to quote Stanislavski, "I don't believe it." All things considered, it would be better if Modi delivered the ultimatum, but Modi opted out by canceling his trip to Moscow. Another hypothesis states that Xi Jinping was chosen to deliver the ultimatum, but he ended up dealing with his own set of problems. Those of you who closely watched the body language and the scenes during his visit to Moscow definitely noticed that the Chinese leader was met with caution and disapproval, that he had no choice but to accept. I'm not going deeply into details here, because I didn't take part in this personally, although I have some information from a number of sources, and I believe this information is largely true. I won't voice it, because I'm not confident that things were developing exactly the way I was told. Anyway, Xi himself is in a quite difficult position at this moment. So far, in this situation, our characters, the authors of the ultimatum, there is another word that I'm really tempted to say here, clowns. Because honestly, from the perspective of them lacking any personal content or influence over the process, this is the word that describes them well. Anyway, they ended up voicing the ultimatum themselves. By the way, it was surprising to see how weak Trump looked in this administrative bureaucratic game as he acquiesced to their demands. In response to the ultimatum, Putin gave his long-awaited speech late at night, and already by now, Zelensky gave his answer by saying, "What negotiations can we talk about if there is no ceasefire?" This was despite the fact that Russia had once again confirmed that no preliminary agreements regarding the ceasefire were made. Here is what Russia's position is. Let's start our dialogue, but in the meantime, the military operation will continue. If you want to negotiate, and you actually mean it, you will continue to negotiate. If you try to sabotage the negotiations, remember, we keep the operation going and will continue solving this on the battlefield. Now we see a remarkable picture. The ultimatum is already ruined. The Ukrainian side does not have the capacity for independent negotiations. And that is exactly why Zelensky said what he said. Consequently, all of this is strongly implying that Zelensky is not an independent actor, and pointing out to the three characters plus Trump. They were offered to decide who the boss is. Trump or one of the three, Merz, Starmer, or Macron. We do not know the answer at this point. Let's see what happens. I am deeply convinced that the negotiations in Turkey between Russia and Kiev will not even start, or even if they start, they will end very soon for a simple reason. During these negotiations, a series of mutually agreed steps will be proposed in order to verify capacities of the sides involved. Just like in this, guys, if we are negotiating, let's both of us do this and do that. Next, we, meaning Russia, do what we agreed upon, but they, the Kiev, do not. Then we will be over. The topic will be closed. This means only one thing. Those standing behind Zelensky, despite making this ultimatum, are not going to take responsibility for their actions. In summary, the picture is the following. While the economic conditions are getting worse, the political, let me just say this word, the political clowns from the European Union remain absolutely confident that they are safe despite negative economic trends, and that is the reason they continue to pursue their goals. First, to defeat Trump, and second, to defeat Putin. It is already clear that Putin is not going to be defeated, despite all the peace party hysteria. Putin gave up everything. Watch, Xi Jinping is coming and Putin will surrender. Or, watch, Modi is coming and Putin will surrender. I can assure you that Putin will not surrender, no matter what the media are trying to say. He will not. It is time to acknowledge this, because the situation changed compared to what it used to be. Regarding Trump, he won't be able to surrender either, but for a different reason. His demiurges, the conservative ones, already understood the scale of the upcoming economic crisis. They are already preparing to take direct control over the United States and the American economy once the collapse occurs. By contrast, the European clowns that continue playing their political games are not preparing for anything. They're incapable of making any preparations by definition, because they cannot even comprehend what's happening. So once the crisis hits, the European politicians will have a breakdown, likely together with the European Union itself. And Great Britain is starting to have serious problems too. If we recall the memorandum of Moore and Burns, then we will see that now Burns is gone, and Moore, as far as I know, is retiring in September. This means that the entire line, the Chaos Party, does not see its future past September 2025. Their only chance to score a victory is to trigger the big war in the Middle East. Well, let's say between Turkey and Israel, because it seems like both we and Trump succeeded in pulling Iran away from the threat of war. It seems like it is done. I really hope so. Well, let's see. The things can still go different ways. For this reason, I think we see very complex political maneuvering. We could observe them on May 9th at the Victory Parade by the fact that some important guests were not in attendance, even though, according to their status, they should have been present. There have been many things happening in the West that are reflections of this maneuvering as well. All of this is done in anticipation of the upcoming financial crisis. Some already understand the scale of this crisis. Some do not understand it yet, and there are those trying to look like real political actors, yet they are not aware of the crisis at all. We will continue watching all these games, knowing that the main events will take place soon. Once again, I will repeat the key thesis. The sooner the collapse happens, the worse it will be for the European Union and China, and the better for the United States. I cannot say if they will eventually understand this or not. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye.